Well, next in the docket, former WFAN host Craig Carton. Carton, a popular sports host, as many of you know, from New York, and before that, certainly a popular host in Philadelphia as well. Well, he was just sentenced 3.5 years. He will report to prison in July. He was convicted of conspiracy, wire fraud, and securities fraud for a ticket sales scheme that he was running in part. Carton, he collected millions of dollars from investors, telling them that he had VIP tickets to sporting events and concerts. He didn't. He used that money to pay off exorbitant gambling debts. Carton admitted at the trial that he was a full-out gambling addict, and that addiction ruined his life. He says as a consequence, he's broke, he's separated from his wife, and he's about to be homeless. Carton says at one point he's borrowed more than $30 million to feed that habit, and he would wager exorbitant sums of money in Atlantic City. Now I'm talking about $25,000 blackjack hands while playing 5 hands simultaneously. Also, interestingly in this case, at the sentencing for Mr. Carton, the judge said that she in fact was a listener. And this was a quote that she said actually at that very sentencing phase. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carton. Colleen from New York. First time, long time. I know you could be fun to listen to. I also knew you could be a jerk." Well, many interesting developments in this trial, and to help us get an inside perspective of it is Derrelle Janey. Derrelle was part of the legal team representing Craig Carton. Derrelle, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, for those of us who watch from the outside as a curiosity to this, one of the things that developed was that Craig Carton didn't deny what happened at the end. He said, in effect, that it was the addiction that led him to the inevitable conclusion he couldn't control the addiction. How does the law, Derrelle, look at if, let's say, a driver gets into an accident, whether they be high or drunk, can they blame drugs or alcohol as a mitigating factor for an accident, regardless of the damage they did to other people or themselves?
Well, listen, it's never the case where when someone commits harm against someone else that they can simply point to, and the law doesn't permit, point to something like drugs or alcohol as an excuse. There is no excuse in the criminal law. Here, in Mr. Carton's case, as an example, the drug, alcohol, the gambling addiction, and the child abuse, which came out in the sentencing, are all part of an explanatory context that you have to take into account to explain why this person did what they're accused of doing.
The judge also dismissed the claim on the part of your client that he never intended to lose the money. It was her finding at sentencing that this was always, in effect, a Ponzi scheme intended to raise the funds to pay off the gambling debts, and there was never any intent to make the investors whole. When you heard the judge said that, what was your reaction?
That's the judge's finding. I understand that she was simply repeating a finding that was reached by the jury. I think everyone in the courtroom heard Mr. Carton's explanation that it wasn't his intention to steal, but he clearly said that the law doesn't view shades of gray. The law determines whether someone had the requisite intent or did not. And in this case, the jury and the judge, as you described, found that he had the requisite intent, and that's why the jury voted to convict him.
Let's talk about the judge for a second, Derrelle, because I got to admit, if I'm sitting in your chair at sentencing and all of a sudden the judge says first time, long time, and she talks about being a fan of the program, often finding your client to be a jerk for some of the things he said on the radio, I'm not so sure I'd be really comfortable with that. Isn't that bringing some of the baggage into the courtroom, especially when she's deciding how long your client's going to spend behind bars?
Look, I take, number one, I think in this case, this judge was simply really making the point that Mr. Carton, in terms of his radio show, and he has said the same thing in numerous instances, puts on a show, and there's an aspect to it where there's a show that he's putting on. I think that she was really in a different way underscoring that point.
That said, though, there's obviously always concerns on the part of every attorney, whether it be on the prosecutorial or the defense side, that they're getting an unbiased ref here at the end of the day. Were you ever concerned that there was baggage being brought in by the judge as a fan, or not so much of a fan of your client, that was in any way going to shade how many years he got?
Never. I thought that the judge tried to be as thoughtful as she possibly could be. I think in post-sentencing interviews, Mr. Carton has said the same thing.
And finally, Derrelle, for us, he's a picture on a screen or a voice on the radio. For you, obviously, you got to know him very well. I'm talking about, obviously, Mr. Carton. What do you say to people if they say, hey, should I feel mad at this guy? He used his celebrity as an entree to basically get his hands on millions of dollars that he lost of other people in a giant fraud. And he threw away all that opportunities was in front of him. Conversely, people say, do I feel bad for a guy? He's lost his wife, his kids, he's lost his freedom here. He's going to have to forfeit millions here and also owe millions in terms of back pay. And he becomes basically a glorified cautionary tale. Which one should they feel?
Listen, I'm not in a position to say either way how anyone should feel. I would simply say this. Whenever someone is sentenced to a term of incarceration, it's a very sad day. It's always a sad day when someone loses their liberty, whether someone believes who isn't close to the facts or not, believes that they should be incarcerated. It's always a sad day. It's always a sad day when children, in this case, lose a parent, when a wife loses a husband, and particularly when they lose them because their illnesses, which is something that is clearly a contributing force in this instance.
Derrelle Janey, I really appreciate a few minutes today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we'll be right back here on RFL right after this.